Today, I'm really, really pleased to be joined by Mollie. And Mollie is somebody who always makes me smile whenever I see her face beaming on my Instagram or on my TikTok feeds. And I just love hearing the insights into the Irish language and the connections between Irish and English that we don't even realize exist. And for many people in Ireland, I imagine that's a huge shock. And I'd love to talk about the experience of this. Strong women in language is, for me, something I think we need to celebrate more. And Mollie, you are a super strong Irish woman with an amazing set of knowledge and experience behind you that really drives wonderful content that you create online. First of all, thank you so much for being such a great source of Irish content for me online. I appreciate
Thank you.
it.
Thank you, Richard. I'm delighted to have this chance to speak to you, and I appreciate your kind words. Yes, it's been quite a journey. And like you say, it's interesting to express a lot of these intricacies of Hiberno English to Irish people who might not realize that they speak that way.
Yeah.
And I've been teaching Irish for about 10 years. And initially it was a lot of one-to-ones and a lot of Americans and Canadians and people living outside of Ireland, or maybe immigrants in Ireland who were so fascinated by the Irish language. So nowadays with my Instagram and my courses, Irish with Mollie, I'm teaching a lot more Irish people and realizing, how do I bridge the gap here? What's the difference between the audience? What do they want to know? What do they know already? And what are their fears and resentments about the language, or their openness to it, I suppose?
Yeah, I mean, it is an interesting thing with a language like Irish in Ireland, because obviously it's a national language, it's compulsory at school, and that kind of carries quite a lot of baggage with it, doesn't it? And obviously,
Definitely.
there's historical baggage that's linked to Irish, and how do you sort of see how that was when you first started and how it is now, and how do you kind of deal with that?
It's a good question. I think initially there was just confusion. People would say, who wants to learn Irish? Who are you teaching? Who are these people? And I would say, well, in Kentucky, there's a guy who speaks Irish to his horses. There's a woman in Alaska who walks up here and she's like a lighthouse manager, and we have a lesson once a week. There are people in New Zealand, like communities speaking Irish together, teaching their children through Irish. And it's phenomenal, the appetite for Irish around the world. And there is also a bit of hostility. You know, you get people saying, it's a dead language, move on, it's a waste of time and money. It was bet into us. People have this idea that Irish was beaten into us. The sad truth is English was beaten into us in Ireland. And there hasn't been a joyful or nourishing, effective way of instilling pride and positivity in the language. And I've been teaching English and traveling around the world. And I think in part that has been very conducive to my career and very helpful in seeing Ireland from a distance in a way, and feeling these nuances and idiosyncrasies and, you know, the humor that's in the language, and seeing, guys, this is so valuable. This is a cultural currency. I know you've said before that language is a vehicle for culture. And truly, I'm so in love with the language, and more so every day. I think trying to remind people what it is that could be fading. And people might think, oh, because it's on street signs and because it's a compulsory language, it's not going to die. But Bahachanga I Alawart, the life of a language is in the speaking of it. And unless we use it and bring up our kids through Irish and, you know, play sport in Irish and use it and hear it, it's not really going to thrive.
Yeah. And it's a very sad thing, actually, that when you think, people not actually using the language. Your language is something that to be used. It's the lifeblood of a community. And I mean, one of the ways I've always thought about it is learning Irish does not negate your need or your ability to speak English. It enhances it. right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is one of
Mm-hmm.
the things that I find particularly positive with your link to Hiberno English, because I think you are enhancing people's ability to appreciate the variety of English that they speak in Ireland. And have you had many comments or pieces of feedback from people to kind of to encourage you to do more of that?
Yeah, it's funny, people saying, you need to write a book. Oh, just go and write a book, please, which is really, really beautiful and motivating for me. I've always loved writing, and maybe it's a project that I will start to invest more time in. But I love that feeling that, people say, I never saw it like that. That hadn't clicked for me. My grandmother used to say that. Or I thought that was normal until I moved to the States.
Mm-hmm.
Or I moved to England and someone corrected me. But it's proper Irish English to say it like this. And we don't want to be corrected, but I'm really enjoying the feedback and the love for the page, and people really going deeper into their identity and heritage and family connection, and realizing, I remember these from my grandparents. And even today I received a lovely message from a follower who said his parents used to speak Irish together when they didn't want the kids to know what they were saying, which is very common. And he started learning Irish again through my course. And he says, now I'm speaking with my dad, and my mom has passed away. And he's so happy that he has someone to connect with. And this feeling of, nostalgia, I suppose, and connection, and
Yeah.
the love that was there.
Yeah, it's unfortunately one of those very sad stories that's quite typical throughout uh, Ireland and the UK of Celtic languages being used just by the parents because they saw it as a disadvantage to speak it to the children,
Mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm.
so it became the parents' secret language. And it is very nice to kind of hear in later life that someone can turn that around and make that a more positive thing, because
Yeah.
there's a lot of trauma I think to be undone there, and I think hearing you talking about heritage and reconnecting with that, it's recognizing the psychology and the sort of the trauma that we talk about in families of losing part of an identity or a language. Because of the language, you lose part of the identity. You can feel that way anyway. It doesn't have to be true, but how you feel is how you feel, right? It's a subjective
Mm-hmm,
thing.
mm-hmm.
So is that something that maybe is a key motivator for people learning Irish, that self-healing, that reconnection, that way of using something that actually really that pulls me back, grounds me almost?
Absolutely. I do webinars and I have a poll at the beginning. Why are you learning Irish? And there's heritage and identity, there's family and friends, there's other, and then another one, maybe school or career. And always 70 to 80% of people answer heritage and identity. And I felt this a lot through the pandemic. I was teaching one-to-ones online, and my calendar was just booked out, and people really felt, this is my passion project. I've always dreamt of learning Irish. I've always put it aside or said, not now. And then the pandemic hit and they felt, I have to do this. This just sings to my soul. And even people getting very emotional, having a lesson with them, and they say, I've never, there's something about the language that just brings me back to Ireland or brings me home, or I can hear my grandparents, or
Mm-hmm.
it's very magical, very fulfilling.
Yeah, and I mean, to kind of get that kind of feedback, is that what kind of drives you through as well? The whole, when people say, "Oh, it's a dead language, don't learn it." I mean, how do you kind of just use that to channel and think, okay, you're focusing on the positive, and this is a rare thing online nowadays. You get these creators who will kind of have like three negative comments, and they'll focus on those, and then there's a sea of really positive things. But I love with you, you're focusing on the really positive things, and that comes through in your videos as well. That positivity, that energy. Is that what feeds you? How does that work in your mind?
Yeah. I do really thrive on praise, but there's an Irish expression, "Mull an oige agus chucky she." Praise the youth and she will come, or she will rise. But actually, it's connected to my grandmother, who inspired me to speak Irish more and teach Irish. And she was a great praiser. She would say, "You're a gem. What are you? You're a dote. You're a bundle of love." And she really loved us into being. And that really motivated me to create the page and to create my courses, because she passed away 2 years ago. And in her last days, it was clear that the Irish was coming back to her a lot more, and she was more able to communicate through Irish than English. And I would call her, I was traveling and living abroad, and I would call her, and it was difficult to have a conversation through English. But if we switched to Irish, it was quite fluid and really great for both of us, I think, to feel so connected. And I do like to focus on the positives, like you say, with being online. Thankfully, I don't experience too much trolling, but of course, like anything, there are people who just say silly things and they want to drag it down. And I just think, what's the point? You know, I hope that they are blessed with the energy and vitality of learning a language, and that in some way they're intrigued or they're curious. But if not, you know, they can stay, you know.
Yeah.
I don't want to bring too much focus onto them, but I do love how it feels like a community. It feels like people sharing different phrases they remember from their childhood or learning experiences, even if a lot of them are negative. People saying they were traumatized by learning Irish. People are waking up to a new sense of Irishness and what it means, you know, that they can relearn. It's never too late. Even if you were forced to learn when you were a kid or a teenager, well, now you're realizing what it's like to find joy in the learning and real understanding, embracing the language more.
And there does seem to be a kind of an awakening. And I've got to say, actually, before I move on to the next thought that I had, I just want to recognize the love in your eyes that came through when you were talking about your grandmother and what she said to you. And I'm really pleased that she got to see you do this. It's super, super special. And that connection, that relationship you had with her, clearly such a deep, meaningful thing. And I mean, I know we all have, well, or many of us will say, well, it's family, but there's something really special about what you described. And it really came across to me as you were talking. So I just want to kind of recognize that and say thank you for sharing it. Clearly a very strong lady herself. I kind of love it. So I can see that drive in you going through the generations, which is wonderful. But it has been, I think, generally in Ireland, I've perceived online, not just the people making content in Irish, and I follow a number of channels. Obviously, yours is the best, but I do follow. I do follow a number of channels that sort of talk about Irish and have actually content in Irish, which is cool. And also, there's been this thing of translating popular songs into Irish and singing them.
Yeah.
TJ Lurgan, isn't it? I think it's called.
Yeah, that's it.
It's funny because I read through the comments sometimes and I'm like, I've seen things where it says, "Oh no, our Irish teacher's going to make us learn this." I can feel it.
I hope they do.
It's kind of funny though, because you see it. And has that all had a big impact in Ireland? I mean, has all of that sort of grown out of this in the last 10 years or 15 years or however long it's been?
I feel like there is a resurgence happening. The Irish colleges, like TG Lurgan, is a Coláiste, like a summer camp for teenagers. And that's really kind of a strong, immersive place to reconnect with Irish as a teenager. Because in school, the language doesn't feel so alive. And you might even go to 4 lessons a week and never speak any Irish.
Yeah.
The teacher might not even be speaking much Irish. So to live for 3 weeks in the summer and have your first kiss and flirt in Irish and dream in Irish and live with this Banantí, a woman of the house who is catering for 14 teenagers. She doesn't speak a word of English to you. So you have to get by. You've got dancing and football and everything and going to the beach in Irish. I even got kicked home sent home from such a camp because I spoke one sentence in English. But that's another story. But I think it's great to see such vitality in the youth, you know. And I think that's coming into the culture in a big way. You see new restaurants popping up and they have Irish names. See that a lot. You know, Irish on the red carpet with Paul Mescal speaking Irish and Brendan Gleeson and on Colleen Keown, the Oscar-nominated movie last year or this year. And it does feel like there's this growing pride and this sense of, you know, that's something we want. You know, people are becoming more interested in Irish mythology, folklore, you know, even people sea swimming and going for hikes and being more connected with the land, I think. And staycationing, even being in Ireland and realizing, oh, is this the standing stone that all the Americans come to see? What's the story? Oh, it's all in Irish. That's fascinating. So
I agree. There was a sort of a sentence I heard recently, and it was, when languages die, actually a lot of the knowledge of the land and the vegetation and the wildlife and many things, like the sort of the intricacies of what you have around them, go with them. And it's not just the language, and it's not just the culture, and it's not just the people, the very typical things that we hear. It's actually bits of knowledge and the detail, and the beauty very often is in the detail. And I always think of, when you look at a flower and you see its beauty, but then when you see these micro photographic representations of the very details within the flower, and you think, wow, there's so much more there than I even imagined. And that to me is Irish in Ireland.
That's such a beautiful way of putting it. Yeah. It is spectacular, the depths you can derive from the simplest things in Irish. You know, we don't say thank you, we say Gurav Mahagat, which is really may goodness be at you. Or you're welcome, Tá fáilte roit, there is welcome before you. So things are very much in a flow around us. You know, if I own something, it's with me. If I have something, it's at me. And I think this really connects with Celtic spirituality, that we are only free in the fluidity of things. Don't hold yourself to something, don't attach. Feelings are on us.
Absolutely.
You know, there's so much that we can learn from that. And I think if you're learning it just to memorize it and say, oh, I need to say these things for my Irish oral exam, you're not thinking, what's the meaning behind these words? Which actually would help you learn the language properly and enjoy it more and be able to speak comfortably and spontaneously instead of learning a script.
Yeah, absolutely. What a beautiful way to end this interview. Thank you so much for joining, and let's all learn a bit of Irish and enjoy the beauty of a different way to express ourselves.
Thank you so much, Richard. Gurv Míle Magat.